Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of The Recipients. And today it is my enormous pleasure and incredible honour to be speaking with the wonderful Damian Griffis. Um, Damian is the recipient of the 2025 Lesley Hall Award for Lifetime Achievement, a remarkable award, a remarkable human, Lesley, and a remarkable human, Damian. So let me give you a little bit of information about the fabulous Damian. Damian is a Warramai man and a leading advocate for the human rights of First Nations people with disability. Damian has been the long-standing central figure in the establishment of First Peoples Disability Network. Fabulous bunch of humans. We love the FPDN mob, which is recognised as the national peak in Indigenous disability and policy. And I'll tell you a bit about the Lesley Hall Award. Lesley Hall, of course, was a prominent activist in our community some years ago and made a great deal of change in our community. And this award was named after her upon her death and is actually one of the awards that came across from the original awards that were run by the Australian government. The community felt when it was establishing these national awards for disability leadership that it was incredibly important to retain the Lesley Hall Award for Lifetime Achievement, not just to honour people who have made an outstanding contribution over time in our community, but to also continue to recognise the work of Lesley. The Lesley Hall Award for Lifetime Achievement is awarded to an individual who has shown commitment to the disability rights movement and worked over time to achieve significant outcomes for disabled people. And I think that pretty much sums up the fabulous Damian Griffis. Welcome, Damian. It's so good to see you today, and a massive congratulations on receiving the Lesley.
Thanks, Christina. I'm really humbled and great to be talking with you again. You're such an amazing leader, and it's a real privilege to be here. I acknowledge country as well. I'm joining from what we call Warramai country in Newcastle today. So thanks for having me, Christina.
Oh, thank you, Damian. And I am joining you from Ngunnawal country, beautiful Ngunnawal country, up in, down in Canberra, in fact. So let's kick off from the beginning, but without it being a life story here. But, how'd you get into this sort of work? Why do you do this stuff? And, why did you become a disability activist or an advocate or, whatever word you want to use? How'd you end up in this gig?
That's a great question, and sometimes I get asked that. And it's for me, I grew up around a deaf grandmother, so watching her isolation and the discrimination she experienced really informed me. She was very isolated and very dependent on us as her immediate family members, and she lived with a lot of fear because of her deafness. And then I was just always around disability, so it's not something particularly unusual from my perspective. And then in my early 20s, I got diagnosed with a number of different psychosocial disability labels, still carry them, generalized anxiety, panic disorder, OCD, a few other things like that. But so that informed me as well. I'm very lucky. I can generally manage that pretty well, a lot luckier than most of my mob who probably don't have access to the resources that I have. So I started working in disability as soon as I left school. I did a lot of support work in the early days. So I've been around the sector for, 30 odd years now. And then meeting Uncle Lester Bostock was a pivotal moment for me in the year 2000. So.
Oh, yes, Uncle. Oh, fantastic. And, one of the things I guess we know about the First Peoples communities is there's a really high prevalence of disability. There's a lot of people out there, but it's also culturally responded to in a very different way to, white folks' way of responding to disability. And does that mean there's sort of more or less activism around it, do you think? How does that seem to sort of permeate the advocacy activism space?
That's a great question. I mean, in traditional language, evidence show there's no comparable word to disability, and that's a wonderful thing. So where a come as you are culture. So all the labels of disability aren't generally used in community. But that presents a perverse problem because to get access to supports, you have to take on those labels. So that's a challenge in itself. And all the evidence shows that we always had roles for community members who had disability. And some of that evidence is now goes back as far as 25,000 years ago at Lake Mungo, where there was you would be familiar with this story, Christina. There's been a fairly recent discovery of a single male footprint and a stick there. So indented in the ground, and the belief by the archaeologists and the anthropologists is this was a one-legged man participating in a hunt moving at speed. So that's 25,000 years ago. So always had modifications and supports for community members with disability. A lot of evidence to show that sign languages has been in existence forever. And it's not uncommon for people, for example, who are blind or vision impairment to have traditional healing roles in community. So disability has always been known to be part of the human experience. So we would actually say we're the thought leaders on inclusion and have a lot to offer the rest of Australian society and the world, in fact, on an Indigenous worldview of disability. But then the challenge is an interesting one because in communities, most of our community members with disability don't necessarily experience discrimination within their own community, but when they start engaging with external systems, be it education, say, health, that's when the discrimination begins. So in some ways, the activism within our movement is more when engaging with external systems. It's not within our own community. So there's some beautiful foundations there in terms of equal participation, not a labelling culture. I mean, you would know only too well, Christina, disability is a Western construct in many ways anyway. So there's some really interesting philosophical elements to that worldview that we think need to be shared widely because we have a way of being that most Australians with disability would want as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing that. And for reference, people might want to check out the fabulous Scott Avery's 2024 disability leadership oration called Deaf Defying. You can search for it on ABC Podcast, which talks about one-legged Mungo Man. So it's a fabulous story. Or historical recounting, I should call it, because it's not a story, it's real. So that's great. It's good. So what sort of work are you doing these days? What do you find yourself doing? What's the sort of cutting edge of your work and FPDN work?
Well, we've got several priority areas. One of them is to continue to do our systemic advocacy, our representation to government and the non-government sector for that matter, about recognising the unique needs of First Nations people with disability. That takes many forms, as you know, Christina, anything from parliamentary inquiries to media appearances or whatever it might be. An increasing part of our work is our individual advocacy function. So we are now formally funded as a national disability advocacy provider, even though we've been doing individual advocacy for 20 more years. Now we've got dedicated advocates to do that work. That work's becoming more and more difficult, I have to say, and the staff, the advocates that work in that area, are dealing with very serious issues of discrimination, very serious matters that relate to, without life and death, to be honest. So very extreme, very complex matters, and that's a growing part of our work. And we're also doing more and more training and informing our own communities about their rights and entitlements. So we have a human rights training program, which we're very proud of, called the Leicester Bostock Human Rights Training Program, which is about informing community about their own rights and entitlements from a disability perspective. And then we also do education and training around understanding disability from an Indigenous perspective, which can go to anybody from, the local RSL to maybe a police station, whatever. Everyone is potentially eligible to learn from that. So, so we're busy like we always are, like all of us are in the disability sector. No 2 days are ever the same. But the work is challenging and as difficult as it's ever been, actually, I would say.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? As you were talking there, Damian, something that I realised is many people would think that an award like this or recognition is about doing something prominent. And, you know, you and I have both worked in the public domain over the years. But as you were talking, I was also really mindful of the fact that most of what we're doing and our colleagues are doing is actually very behind the scenes. It's hidden, it's in community, it's with you know, those fringes you talked about, going out to places that, you know, the thankless task of talking to people who don't get it, and you're trying to you know, share understanding, and, you know, the really hard frontline work of saving people's lives, supporting people in very segregated, marginalised spaces. You know, it's really an iceberg in that regard. I'm thinking, you know, so is is recognition or prominence or that public domain actually a desirable thing for us, or is it something that becomes an inconvenient necessity that often gets in the way?
Oh, another great question. I don't like the limelight at all. I'm a very introverted person. My anxiety disorder, I'm very good at masking it, but I live with it all the time. So I don't like to be prominent at all. And in fact, an award like this is not about me at all. It's about the movement. There are many colleagues and people that are doing work every day that deserve recognition. They're saving lives, or they're changing people's lives for the better. And for me, this is about, it is humbling to be recognised. And Lesley, as you mentioned at the beginning, Christina, was an amazing woman and a friend and colleague to both of us, and someone you knew very well. And she was a fierce feminist, and a wonderful woman that we lost sort of more than a decade now, I think. So,
Oh yeah, it'd be that long. Yeah.
yeah. So to be recognised in that sense is great. But if it raises the profile of the issues, then I'm very happy to receive it. But it's not about me, and nor should it be. But if it means that we're getting greater focus on mob with disability, then that's a really good thing. I was always taught, and I was very fortunate to be mentored by Uncle Lester Bostock, who was a father figure to me, and he was a very humble man. And I think humility is really, really important. I really believe that, and I believe taking your personal ego out of things is critical to being effective as a leader. We're in a world now of enormous ego, and particularly dangerous male ego, and the world is rapidly moving in that direction, or been heading in that direction for some time. So we need to return, I think, to values of, as you advocate for always, Christina, community, generosity, kindness, love. We need to use those phrases more and more, because we're going to have to fight for these values more and more into the future. You would kind of hope that we wouldn't have had to, and I would have. And I'm an optimist, actually, despite all that. I mean, I think you have to be an optimist to do this work, eh, Christina? So,
Yeah, yeah.
and uh, so you've got to believe in a better day. But Uncle Lester also taught me, which is a very cultural thing, that we carry the message stick. So he handed it on to me. I spent a lot of time with him, watching him. Great listener, humble man that achieved extraordinary things in his life. He's one of the founders of Aboriginal media in Australia. You'd hardly even know that in some ways. Treated every single person with respect. He had a lot of non-Indigenous friends. I was really humbled. So he passed it on to me, and I need to pass it on as well. So he always knew his place in the world, like where he sat in the world, and probably didn't take himself too seriously either, which was a good thing.
Yeah, I've oh, just, you know, sitting here enjoying the pleasure of sitting down and, you know, having a chat with you, and we're doing it for work, Damien. It's so good. Uh, I'm really interested in we were talking a bit before about, within community, it's not, disability is not such a thing. It's only when you step out into the wider world and you try and engage with the, well, Western systems, I guess, schools and hospitals and health systems and, the justice system, all of that, that things turn up. But I'm interested in, and if we want to talk about the social model of disability, hello, folks, there's a nice little illustration of it. But I'm interested in any personal sort of roadblocks, barriers that you've come across. And, that's not about, oh, somebody once told me that I shouldn't do this. I'd never make it anywhere because I'm useless. It's not that stuff particularly, but that might be it. but, what have you found that people have sort of chucked in your way that just say, no, you can't keep doing this. No, this isn't going to happen. This, and you were there at the beginning of FPDN. You were part of getting the whole thing set up. Was there resistance to that? Did people think it shouldn't happen or?
Oh, definitely,
Mm.
absolutely, and often government was part of that. We started our organisation on a $50,000 grant, and um, you had to, Uncle Lester volunteered his time. You get paid well, all those sort of things. You dipped into your own pocket to get the organisation going, but that was just part of it. That is just the nature of it. And Uncle Lester was volunteering his time, and he was someone who was an activist all his life and was never financially rewarded for that. So I've got extraordinary admiration for that generation of leaders. I think the hardest part is it feels like saying the same things as saying 25 years ago. That is always a challenge. You feel like you're repeating yourself, and then you start questioning. Well, the system just doesn't get it, eh? Like doesn't understand what we're trying to talk about. I think there's been an evolution, though. I think if we zoom out, there has been progress for Australians with disability and mob for disability. Yes, but nowhere near enough. Nowhere near universal. We're far from an inclusive society, nowhere near it, actually. And I think the frustration I feel sometimes is a very, very wealthy country. And in my work, I also get to work in the Pacific and overseas and stuff from time to time. We should do so much better, like we're a very wealthy country, very resource privileged, but we fail those that most need support in Australian society, being First Nations people with disability, being Australians with disability in general. I think we like to present to the world as innovative, fair. Yeah, I'm not so sure. It's not the reality of having been in the Barkly region 2 weeks ago. Nah, not good enough. We don't have people with reliable water sources, and that happens in Australia. And I think the more we get away from understanding each other or really understanding people's lives, then I worry where that takes Australia. That's my worry. But
Mm.
I'm an optimist, though. I think deep in the hearts of all people is the desire for people to live fairly. But I think we also have to have truth telling, and in disability as well, not just for First Nations mob. Truth telling and disability. The Royal Commission was part of that, but that's already looking like something that's gathering dust on a shelf, I have to say,
Yeah.
like a lot of other Royal Commissions. So we've got to start talking big picture stuff. What do we want Australia to be? What do we want it to be for Australians with disability? And yeah, so I think there's a long way to go, but there's always barriers, Christina, every day. I don't experience physical barriers. I'm not a person with physical disability. I always have to manage my mental health. I'm pretty good at it, though. Like I have learned a lot of skills on how to do that. But I worry about the lives of our mob, that it's a day-to-day proposition. It's just, can I get food on the table today? Or I'm homeless, or that's the worry that we have. I think greater disparity at times as well. So Yeah, barriers, always attitudes. There's racist attitudes. I'm fortunate. I'm fair skinned, so I don't experience the racism that most mob darker skinned than me. But when people know the work I do, I do, and I don't always share it with people. I used to play a bit of golf, and you often play with strangers, and I wouldn't tell people necessarily because I wasn't up for the reaction that day because you're on all the time.
Yeah.
When you're leading a First Nations organisation, you're on all the time in your private life, your public life, and same as a disability activist like yourself, Christina. Like you all, I don't know that governments and bureaucrats understand that you're
Yeah.
on all the time, all the time,
It's
all the time, sitting next to someone on a plane or a bus on a train, or yeah, you're on all the time. Does that make sense? Yeah.
it's an enormous sense. It's actually when I first started running an advocacy organisation. That's about 15 years ago. And one of the first things I realised, it was the first week of doing it. I thought, hello, this is not just my work.
Mm.
It's my life and my work coming together now. And it is literally a 24/7 thing. It is constant. And we have remarkable levels of burnout in
Mm.
the disability community. And I suspect that's part of it. You know, it's probably like that in any frontline activism community, I guess. You know, you're living and working your work because every day you get out of bed, if you're a person who's able to get out of bed, and you having to deal with it in the street. And you know, for First Nations folk, it's the colour of your skin or the understanding that you're an Aboriginal person. You know, for someone like me, I come with a big piece of hardware. I've got the chair underneath me. And when people see something, they treat you as different. And I'm wondering, you know, is Australia a comfortable country? We're all kind of comfortable as long as we agree to be comfortable. But the minute somebody points something out that's a bit awkward, everyone sort of backs away slightly and starts to, yeah, we don't want to hear that. That's sort of damaging our sense of equilibrium or something. There's something going on there that rattles people's cages. You know, they don't want to have to look at themselves and think, oh yeah, I'm racist. You know, I mean, I must be. I've grown up white. There's stuff where I've been conditioned to think a certain way and understand certain things. And I periodically have to look at myself and think, oh my goodness, yes, that's hello, that'd be a racist moment. You know, I'm sure everybody does it. It's just that people don't want to see themselves doing it. And we know it happens with disability. People use words, they pat us on the head, you know, disabled women, we're perpetually treated like we're 12, all of this sort of stuff. Yeah, it's
I
ever
think
present, ever present.
it's so true, and
Mm,
yeah, the this I I don't quite notice how to say this other than this way. I think you can determine a lot about a person about the way they interact with people with disability. Um, you've got the patronizing style. You've got the which is this is all very odd to me because I my nan was my nan. That's all.
yeah,
But and there are also some people that hang around in the sector that shouldn't be hanging around the sector as well. The NDIS, I think, has exposed some of the very unfortunate behaviours that go on as well. We need to have honest conversations in Australia. We need to be much better at truth telling. I think the referendum exposed that. It was very hard to campaign during the referendum. I lost track of how many times I was racially, uh, uh, particularly when you were handing out flyers and stuff. So, and it's because people don't know the history, right? Or they ignorance is bliss. You kind of prefer not to know.
mm,
Like in any good relationship, you have to get to resolution by talking about things. And I think we need to do a lot more truth telling around disability. One of the good things about the Royal Commission, Disability Royal Commission, it did expose things that was really good, and aired things that needed to be shared. But it was really only reported, it didn't really make the mainstream media much.
yeah.
And that
Yeah.
I think is a problem because the treatment, as you know, of people with disability in Australia is abominable many times. The abuse is very, very serious, the abuse of women with disability in particular. Um, and if we want to be a society that values all Australians, then we need to be better at truth telling and we need to get through the uncomfortable conversations so that we can progress all our relationships, you know.
Yeah.
Australia's always got great potential, you know, and I love my country passionately, as I know you do,
Mm.
um, deeply, really deeply.
Yes.
You feel it in your bones, um, and love this place, and that's why you want it to be better all of the time. And we've always got to choose love over hate. We've always got to choose listening
Mm.
over ignorance. You know, we've got to choose. Got to choose truth telling. We've got to choose being mature and optimistic and hopeful. You know, and people like yourself and Lesley and many other legends and people that have, you know, won awards. I mean, awards are nice and everything, but um, I'm always reminded by Uncle Lester. You know, he's always at my shoulder. I talk to him every day. Um, and his way of moving through the world was beautiful. And he's inspired me, and so many elders have. And Auntie Gail Rankin, as you would know well,
Oh,
is a
lovely Auntie Gail. Yes. Oh,
extraordinary woman, straight talker.
yeah.
Um, and we need straight talking as well, you know. We've got to have a lot more straight talking, and that's part of truth telling as well. But yeah,
Yeah, it
there's always
is.
barriers, eh? There's always.
There's always stuff, and I think I'm conscious of time. Came across yesterday a word, and I just thought, can't remember who I was talking to, but I thought that's one of those words. It's a classic, lived experience. It was. It's a classic euphemism to sort of sanitize who we are and to avoid using the word disability. We're
I
really.
phrase, is that okay to say? I don't understand what it means.
I don't think anybody does. I think people make it up as they go along, and that's
But
why proper words that speak directly are important words. That's the point. Yes. Oh, look, we could talk all morning, but there's, a couple of things I want to just touch base on before we finish up today. One of them is to just check in with you about what the next year might bring. What are you kind of hoping for or working on that you specifically want to see? And I forgot to mention as well, I realised you've just been elected co-chair, I think, of the Pacific Disability Network. So some big work going on out with our colleagues out in the Pacific as well, which is terrific to see.
yeah. I mean, there's some amazing cultural knowledge out in that part of the world as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
But you know, extreme poverty and challenges there, for sure. Well, we do our 5-year strategic plan in February, so that's great. We're trying to secure for the first time a 5-year funding contract with the Commonwealth Government, and you would know this only too well, Christina. 25 years of year-to-year proposition is exhausting, as you know.
Exhausting. It's why
So,
I don't do it anymore, mate. It's why I stopped. Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
so we're hoping to and confident we'll secure long-term funding, which means we can plan better as an organisation, but also gives job security to people as well on a human level. But
Yeah.
also means that we can plot out where we're going to do our advocacy, our community visits all around the country, and also be able to reassure people that we're there for with them, beside them for the long term with their matters they need support with. So that's probably our big goal for next year. Um, and we have just been asked to take on a leading role with the establishment of a global network of Indigenous people with disability, which is really humbling for us as well. But that's also really important because Indigenous brothers and sisters around the world all experience with disability, all experience the same, very similar experiences of discrimination, and yet we all have a worldview that is so critical for the rest of the world to understand that we've always known disability part of human experience, and we actually want to share that with the world. So So yeah, there's some big things on the horizon, but yeah, onward as we go. I wanted to ask you how you keep going, Christina, because you're extraordinary. It's I don't know. We just have to, don't we?
We just have to,
Yeah.
Damo, and in fact, I once said of my grandmother, not my famous grandmother, the other one, you know, she was a bit like the Queen Mary. You know, nobody ever told her that she couldn't turn around, and you know, so she just kept going in the same direction.
I
And
like
I suspect I picked that one up from her, to be honest. The relentless drive, yeah. Look, we all get tired, we all struggle, we all have periods of doubt, and I think that's something for um, you know, many folk who might look to people like you and me to realise is that it's not all beer and skittles. You know, it's not all great fun. Sometimes, in fact, it's very little of that, and you know, but it is the love of our community. It is the deep friendships we have with each other, and the recognition, the respect that I think is what keeps us going. Of course, this isn't about me, it's about you. That's good on you. I spotted that one there. But it is those things. And, you know, as I say those, I see you as one of those people and many of our colleagues who are what we might even look at as the elders of our movement these days. You know, those of us who've been around for a fair while who share many of those sorts of approaches and qualities. And I am deeply privileged to be amongst this community and to be friends with many of those people, including you, my dearest. But it's not easy. It's very hard sometimes. It's very hard. Yeah. Yeah.
we keep going. We keep
We
going.
do. We do, because it is our community and we love it deeply, and it needs to be done.
Yes.
It needs to be done.
Yes.
That's it. That's it. Damian Griffis, we are out of time. It's been an absolute pleasure and an enormous privilege to speak to you this morning. And congratulations once again on receiving the 2025 Lesley Hall Award for Lifetime Achievement in the National Awards for Disability Leadership.
Thanks, Christina. Good on you. Thank you.